Hi, I'm Colin Morgan, executive producer of Built to Sell Radio. And if you've been enjoying this podcast, you're going to absolutely love our new newsletter, Built to Sell News. We share actionable tips and insights to help you get inside the mind of an acquirer and punch above your weight when it comes time to exit. To subscribe, simply head over to builttosell.com/subscribe to sign up for free today.
James Ashford, welcome back to Built to Sell Radio.
Thanks, John. Great to see you.
Yeah, your episode was one of my favorites because I thought that, I got the real James Ashford. It was great. I got the whole deal.
Yes.
And you had an amazing exit. Just for people who haven't listened to that episode, I'll encourage people and I'll link up to it in the show notes and so forth. But just kind of very briefly describe the GoProposal exit, what the business did and who you sold to, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, sure. So I guess just prior to that, always kind of wanted to be an entrepreneur. My family are entrepreneurs. They work for companies, right? So it was kind of a rebellion against that. Always kind of associated entrepreneurship with freedom, got into it. It's the opposite of that, made no money, kind of takes up all your time. I had failed businesses and eventually figured things out. And then I was working with lots of different businesses and ultimately helping them to fix their sales process. Because if you can just kind of sell your services to clients faster, in greater quantities, and convert them quicker and, not be kind of chipped down on price, you can solve so many other problems in your business. If you can also scale that and get everyone else doing it in the business, so it's not just reliant on you, it's kind of game on, right? So I was doing that for lots of different businesses. And I'd read your book, right? So I'd read your book early on in my career. And so always had this idea of Built to Sell. So I was selling my services, my consultancy services to different business, fixing the same problem. And then I solved the problem for an accountancy firm, which involved developing some software, doing some training, changing the mindset, etc. And it was only when another accountancy firm heard about it and said, how are they doing what they're doing? And that was it. Like I had your book in my head and it was like, got it. This is the business that could be built to sell. Here we go. So started off and like called my developers, figured out how we could do it really cheaply. So we kept the cost so low. We built the whole thing on a WordPress multi-site, which curiously has the same DNA as a SaaS product. But all the kind of the engine's already built for you. So we kind of got the engine, built the chassis around it, made a few tweaks, and was out the door with it for, like I say, $4,000 to get our first customer on board. But this whole idea of Built to Sell, and I've talked about this since, like when I designed the logo, the first thing I did before we even got our first customer was to put underneath, who could the potential buyers be? So it was in the accounting industry. So it was Xero, QuickBooks, Intuit, Sage. So I wrote underneath, GoProposal, a Sage company, GoProposal, a QuickBooks company, to get into my mind that
Did you really?
Yeah. Design before our first customer. Yeah. So, and then every team member that came on board, John, they were told, you are joining a business that is built to sell, and you will be on this journey and you will have a great story at the end of it. So everyone knew what they were working towards. We had a relatively junior team, but effectively implemented all of my knowledge into this business, scaled it fairly rapidly with no investment at all, and a real high focus on creating amazing customer experiences. I wrote a book because it was a cheap way of marketing, kind of built my personal brand, did lots of video content, protected as much IP as I possibly could within the business, built a great community, lots of education around it. And I knew that if I could get it to kind of £1 million in revenue, that then companies would start to be interested in it. And I had an idea, a sense of what that multiple could be. And we started to get a few, after year 5, started to get a few businesses interested in us, but it kind of fizzled to nothing. So I took a deep breath and thought, right, let's take it to market. Let's just go for it. Let's put our best suit on. Let's go see if now is the right time to sell. Brought in an M&A company. And it was just after COVID when kind of SaaS businesses were getting real peak valuations because everyone thought we were going to be locked down forevermore and just everything was going to be digital, right? And did 6 management presentations, 2 made us an offer, and then we sold it for the highest possible multiple we could. And whilst I always kind of acknowledge good luck and fortune and serendipity and all these things, we had done everything we could to have bumped that multiple to be as high as we possibly could.
And it was a big exit. But the way we pitched it in describing your original episode, I kind of looked it up before our interview today. It was, how did James Ashford sell a 12 employee company for 8 figures?
Yeah.
So it was a good punching above your weight story, which is great. So you got to the top of the mountain, and this was the kind of thing that you'd been chasing, which is cool. Sage was the acquirer. Sage, of course, people in the United States might remember the name Peachtree. But Sage is actually a UK-based company.
40 years old, FTSE 100 company, £2 billion revenue, big deal. 13,000 staff, I think, or something like that.
Yeah. What was it like? Just describe the structure. Was it an earnout or an equity role? Like, how did Sage kind of lock you into the business for?
So a big chunk up front, and then 2 payments over the following 2 years that were they weren't contingent; they were just deferred payments.
And were they contingent on you being an employee of GoProposal or Sage?
Yeah, it was a real low bar. So being an employee and not being fired, like it was a fairly low bar. But I was fully committed to helping to integrate the software and the team and the clients as well into that new business. So, and it was a really interesting process, John. We'd scale the business through, like, from the marketing point of view, by me producing lots of video content. The interesting bit is that they wanted to take the product GoProposal into France, Germany, Spain. So the book, especially as ChatGPT came out, right? So the book was all translated automatically into those other languages, and all of the videos were all lip synced and transcribed into all of the different languages as well. So all of these assets became incredibly valuable. So that business has continued to scale in different countries without my involvement at all, because of the assets that were in the business.
So what was your job description at Sage?
It was quite loose. It was ambassador, and they knew. I don't know if you kind of follow football very much, soccer as we call it over here, but I kind of liken myself to Eric Cantona for Manchester United. So Eric Cantona was like a rebellious player, and no manager could ever keep him, because he was just like a bit of a loose cannon, a bit of a force of nature, until he finally found Manchester United, and Alex Ferguson said, "Just do whatever you want to do. Like, we're fine. We'll work around you." And the magic happened. So I feel that they put someone in charge of me, my direct line manager, kind of recognized my Eric Cantona-ness, as it were, and kind of gave me a bit of a free role within the business and protected me as much as possible. So realized that there was a lot of bureaucracy coming my way with being in a large PLC, and did manage to shield me to an extent. I did feel some of it. And it's not a criticism of Sage at all, but just the nature of a large corporate with shareholders and all this, right? So brand ambassador, I think, is a loose term, John.
And your boss, what was his or her name?
Neil.
Did you have the conversation with Neil and said, "Look, I'm kind of an Eric Cantor. I don't know the reference, so I'll just trust you in this. I'm a bit of a loose cannon. I'm not." Did you kind of like put your cards on the table, or did Neil recognize it, or how did that truce or that sort of understanding come to be?
So I was quite known in the space. We'd done a lot of, I was quite out there anyway. I was, I hate the term influencer, and my kids and my wife are very quick to remind me that not only a very small number of accountants know me. Like calm down, right? So I'm keeping very humble with this. But people in the space were aware of me, and kind of that I was quite outspoken, and I would kind of say my mind, and I was happy to challenge people and stand up for what I believed in, and so I think my character was already known. But then Neil was very close to the whole sales process, which is, very intense. You're in very intense meetings with each other. Met him a few times, and he was just a really smart guy as well. Just I respect him so much, because he'd obviously been in the corporate world for some time, but just had a really good measure of people. And so he just got a good sense of me. There was never a formal conversation. He just had a good understanding.
But he was a suit.
He was a suit, but kind of a cool suit, I guess. Like he knew the crack. So yeah, he wasn't fully corporatized, I guess. He wasn't fully institutionalized, I would say.
How did you, so you had this loose title of brand ambassador. You had a pretty favorable earnout, I'll put in air quotes. You didn't have to earn anything. You were just had to show up to work and not get fired. So the bar was very low. What was it like? Kind of, that sounds like the panacea for any entrepreneur. Like, I don't have to actually do anything. I got to go work for this company. I'm going to cash my paycheck and get rewarded. What was that tenure like? Like qualitatively, what words would you use to describe that period?
Yes, so the whole thing is really really unusual, and like I think I've processed most of it and understood what I was going through, and I've really tried to understand it, and I've had therapists and mentors to help me to understand it, because I want to have this conversation and I want to share the learnings with people who have been through this process and who may be struggling, or people who are preparing for this process as well, But the big shift that I noticed was, as an entrepreneur, you're playing to win. It's the only game you can play. Like, so whatever happens, you're just playing to win. Whatever goes down, how can I turn this situation into a positive situation? It's not that you're not thinking about what can go wrong. My head's running, like was in a constant state of paranoia, thinking, where can this kind of fall down? You're always running a million miles ahead, thinking, right, what are the issues here? But ultimately, we've got to play to win. And then, so I've now won. So you said I could now be fired, which is, we kind of say laughing, oh, you could get fired. Yeah, like what are you going to get fired for? Well, when I did the webinar with you, there was a part where I overshared in the webinar about the deal process. Like,
oh, really?
Well, so I messaged your guy. So, but it was like you just asked me innocently some questions, but it went on for a long time, and my guard dropped, and I shared some bits. Well, that then got picked up by someone in Sage, but no one came to me. Like, someone told someone who told my boss, who pulled me into a room and said, you shouldn't have shared this about the deal. So the state of mind that I'm in now, John, is I'm not playing to win. I'm now playing not to lose. Like, I've already won. So you can now be fired. So I'm thinking, shit, is this the thing that I'm going to get fired for? So I contacted you and your guy. I said, there's this section, it needs to come out of the webinar. And your guy was like, yeah, no problem. Take it out. It's like 5-minute job. It was out. And so like, my heart's going like 10 to a dozen, thinking, because I've switched from playing to win to playing not to lose, which is so subtle, but it's a very dangerous shift if you're not aware you've made it, because you've got to switch back out of it at the other side.
So that's a really interesting perspective that I've never heard before, and a really cool insight. I would also imagine that a large enterprise company, I should share. I used to run a market research company. This goes back 20 years ago now, where we helped very large enterprise companies, Barclays, British Telecom, Wells Fargo, understand and market to SMBs. It was a market intelligence company. And so I had a sort of a side seat, not a front row seat, but a kind of a seat at the table, watching how these giant companies think and act and behave. And one of the things that I observed, and I'd be curious if you saw something similar, was just how conservative they are. To your point, and it just all came running back to me when you're describing playing not to lose. Their whole lens on the world is like, how do I not screw up? Like, how do I not damage the brand, not damage the channel, not damage my employees, my customers, my suppliers? Like, it's all conservative, like how not to screw up as opposed to how to win. Yeah. Did you, like, not only were you not playing to win, did you find that Sage, and not disparaging Sage, it's a giant company, but did you find that their lens on the world is, okay, like, how do we preserve what we built?
Absolutely. And this is the big thing to be aware of. Like, once you're aware of it, you can kind of protect yourself a bit against it. And again, I'm not singling out Sage here, because I've spoken to other people, and it's the same with all these large companies, right? So it's that they are thinking that, but they're all thinking, I don't want to lose my job. Like, so everybody's kind of protecting their own position as well. So Whereas with a small company, 12 people, you're all playing to win it's a safe environment. We all have to take risks. We all have to run experiments. We're all in this together. It's cool. Like I'm connected to everybody. We're gonna do this, right? But then all of a sudden, you find yourself in a big company where now everyone's, and probably rightfully, thinking about their own jobs and their own career and not getting fired. Like they know, not that it was an environment where people regularly got fired at all, but people think about their own jobs. So let me give you an example. So let's say we were to launch a marketing initiative, in our business. We'd be like, well, just get on with it. Like, let's see what happens. Try it and we'll
give it a shot. Right.
If it doesn't work, we'll stop it, or whatever. I don't give a shit. Let's go. Where with them, it's like, right, we've conducted a survey. We've asked 200 people. And it's like, and you're like, yeah. I remember being in this meeting, sitting there thinking, and I said, can I ask this question? It's going to sound stupid. How many pints of beer the people drank when you asked them these questions? Like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, how pissed were they? Like, well, what does that matter? I'm like, well, no one's going to tell you the truth until they're at least 3 pints in. So I had a conversation with 2 accountants last week who were all hammered. We're in Scotland, and this is therefore what I think should happen. And they're like, what? Based on 2 conversations with 2 drunk accountants in Scotland. Yeah, I think this is the right way to go. And that feels right to me. But the reason why people want surveys is because if it then goes wrong and that doesn't play out, somebody can say, well, the survey said this, therefore I'm keeping my job, right? And I think that's just the nature of these large companies where the entrepreneurial spirit is, let's give it a go. On top of that, you also get much more siloed roles. So for example, you have a legal department, and the legal department have a milestone that they're trying to achieve. So this is a massive shift, John. This is a massive difference. As a small entity, as a small entrepreneurial business, there's only one goal, which is, our mission, which is we're trying to serve our clients, or we're trying to conquer the industry, or whatever it is. And we're all in this mission together. There's only one goal. We're all connected. The moment you get into a different business, well, the legal department don't care about what the marketing department's doing anymore. That it's everything separate. The legal department have got to protect the legals of the business and make sure they don't get sued, or that a contract is right, or whatever. So one of the things I brought in, for example, was I'd got a guy, a very prominent accountant in the space, to write a book, and we were going to get the rights of the book for Sage, which is brilliant, right? But the process, the legal process of getting the contract right was just taking so long. And it got to a point where I'm like, guys, we just need to get this over the line. And they said, well, at the end of the day, the number one priority is that we are fully protected with what we are agreeing with this guy. I'm like, no, it's not. That's not the number one priority. The number one priority is that we sell some books and like bring some customers in. Like that's the overall goal. But people lose sight of the overall goal because, again, they want to keep their job. The legal department have a specific milestone, and that's all they're interested in. So it's a very different world to the entrepreneurial world that we're from.
And how did that impact you psychologically? I'm sure at times it was frustrating, but like, how was that to deal with? I mean, you've been paid out. I mean, you had all the money you never needed. So like, did you care?
Yeah, really cared because, like, we love what we do. Like, and this is the other thing, right? This is so interesting. I find all this stuff. So we tell the world a bullshit story why we're doing what we're doing.
Who's we? Sorry, by the way.
Entrepreneurs, all entrepreneurs.
So you
and you.
Okay.
We all have the same bullshit story. So I'm doing it to, we're going to make this life-changing sum. We're going to, create great employment opportunities for my team. We're going to change an industry. We're going to, I'm going to create generational wealth. I'm going to give my children opportunities that I never had. And we're going to live in a house. My wife's going to love this house. And we have all these stories that we're telling everybody, right? Okay. So we're working towards this goal, and then we hit this milestone, and we have now, on the face of it, fulfilled every single goal that we told the world that we were aiming to achieve, right? But we've been lying. Because the reason why we've been doing all this stuff is because we just fucking love doing it. Like, I just love doing it, okay? I love the grind. I love the challenge. I love trying to get this rock up the hill. I love figuring shit out. I love doing what I'm doing. But you can't tell people that. Like if you're at 2 a.m. in the middle of the night and your wife comes down and says, why are you still here? Or you've got to go to that conference. You've got to travel to America. But you've got this event here. Why are you leaving the family? You can't say, because I just love it. I love doing it. I'm just doing it for me. Yeah, I love doing this. Yeah, you can't say that. You can't say that. So you have to tell this other story, and eventually you believe this story, and then you achieve it, and you stop worrying. You start to think, well, why do I feel like shit? Why do I feel so terrible? And it's because I've stopped doing the thing that I love doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And so you're in this straitjacket at Sage. Like they haven't said you can't do anything, but they've made it clear. Look, we're a conservative, giant $2 billion turnover company, whatever they are. You don't have the adrenaline rush of achieving your KPIs and your goals and your accomplishments like that. That adrenaline rush is gone. So like, what's that like? Like, just describe the emotion of being in that sort of cage.
I don't think you necessarily realize it when you're in there, because you're still working towards another goal, which is to get to the end of the process and to get the final payout. So there is still
without getting fired.
So there is still an objective that you're working towards. But there's also this weird thing. And I remember saying to Heather, who was the operations director of GoProposal, so we're just a small thing. We sold to this huge 40-year, £2 billion company. I remember saying to Heather, it's going to be so exciting this. We're going to finally see how you should be doing things. Like, we've just been making this shit up all along, right? But we're going to now see the real way to. So you go into this relationship kind of bowing down, thinking they have to have got all this stuff figured out. Everything. Customer service, sales, how to run webinars, how to do marketing. They have to have got all this stuff locked down. So you go into this doubting yourself and putting all of your faith into this thing. And then you get into it and you'll experience things where you're like, I'm not quite sure that's right. So you kind of start to question yourself and then question this. I remember being excited about a initiative I was launching, and we got it all planned. And then I got into this meeting with this guy, and his first question was, who's risk assessed this? I'm like, I don't know what you mean. Well, who's risk assessed us doing this project? I'm like, who's risk assessed us not doing it? Like, everything has a risk, but you've got this one person looking at it, but then you start to doubt yourself thinking, shit, should I do a risk assessment? And then I had another initiative, another thing that I was launching, and it involved a big marketing launch of a book that I mentioned earlier. And I remember being in this marketing meeting, and there's all these marketing team, and they've got all these spreadsheets, and everything's got colors on it and Gantt charts. And I'm looking at thinking, I don't even know how to do a Gantt chart. So you then think, you guys must have all this stuff figured out, like how fancy your spreadsheets are. So it really makes you doubt yourself. And that was my turning point, where I thought, hang on a minute, I actually disagree with everything that we're doing here. I'm going to do this my own way. Give me £1,000, get out of my way, and I'll show you how to launch this book. And then what I did, this was my big turning point, actually. I then went back to my default self, which was, how do we do this? How do we crack this? Who's doing this already? James Clear. James Clear had such a fantastic launch of Atomic Habits. Where is he describing that launch? He did an interview with Tim Ferriss where right, let me go watch the interview of how James Clear did his launch, wrote it out word for word. That's what we're going to do. I can do that for about £1,000. Let's go with that. And it was at that stage that I reconnected with myself, which is learning again. And this was the big thing when we go back to our like, how do we figure this out? Where am I going to get the answers from? I don't know how to do this, so let me go and learn. And it was in that growth phase that I reconnected back to myself. But that was getting towards the end of the 2 years, I guess.
Interesting. And you're so right. There is something inherently enjoyable about learning. Like, when I was in school, I never actually liked learning. Like, I didn't really connect. I was just kind of going through the motions, ticking the boxes, et cetera. Now, like, I like picking up a book, and oftentimes it's not because I need to do it for work. It's just that I actually enjoy learning about some piece of history or some idiosyncratic thing. It's inherently enjoyable to learn something, and you key on something really interesting. And that once you stop learning and you stop hacking, that you lose that that enjoyment.
Yeah. And the fulfillment as well, John. So I remember learning this from Tony Robbins. Like, we have these 4 basic needs that need to be satisfied: the need for certainty, the need for uncertainty and variety, the need for love, and the need for significance. And if we can satisfy those positively, it unlocks the final 2, which is the need for growth and the need for contribution. And that's where we get all of our juice from and all of our excitement, when we're growing and when we're giving back and helping and serving others. And so I think I'd lost connection to that, because you also think, I've done it. What do I need to learn anymore? I've achieved what I need to achieve. So I'd stagnated, I think, as well. So you're in this different environment, and you kind of think, well, they must have it all figured out. And you stop learning as well. And you lose what makes you an entrepreneur. And I've had kind of therapy, which we can dig into, because after the final payments, I just dropped off an entire cliff. I dropped off the mountain.
I want to get to that. There's one more thing I want to know about the rule at Sage. So you go from all in this together, 3 musketeers, everybody's working together. Heather's a key person on the team. You're building up. You have this amazing sale to Sage. Then you all become employees of Sage. You get the little name badge, you get the employee number, you get rolled into the healthcare plan or whatever. And all of a sudden, you and Heather and other people on the old legacy GoProposal team are now kind of all employees of GoProposal, right? And excuse me, employees of Sage. And although I'm sure there was a little bit of a hierarchy between you and Heather, still you're now, that hierarchy is less pronounced. There's lots of other stakeholders. There's lots of other more senior people at Sage. And the major difference, though, is that you've got an 8-figure check in your jeans. She doesn't. And nor do the other 11 employees. Now, I know you were grateful and you shared, but realistically, there's a big delta between your former employees' wealth and your wealth at this point. Did that create animosity, resentment? Was it hard? Because now Heather goes from being part of like this cool entrepreneurial, let's take the hill attitude, to being like in the bowels of a giant company. Do you know what I mean? Like it must have been hard for her. How did you stick handle that?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think what I can share here. So we'll go with it, and I don't know what trouble I can get into from this, but anyway, we'll say this. So first of all, they were really looked after. The team were looked after financially. They all got significant pay rises, and like you say, entered into schemes and bonuses and all these things that we could never offer. So their pay significantly jumps. Great pension schemes, all these things. So that was proper, really, really looked after. And then on top of that, as part of the deal, the original GoProposal team, they got a payout after 3 years as well. And that was the reason we went with Sage, because they'd considered the team and looking after them and caring for them. So my payouts finished after 2 years. They all got paid out after 3 years. So it was considered, and just really smart as well, because of that delta, exactly what you've just described there, John, that, you know, they're really smart people, that they've done this many times before, and they want this to work. So I think that was the successful side of things. Where I think that the challenge came was that we were a team with a mission, and I was leading that mission, and then Heather was the ops director, and then we had a North Star. Everyone had a North Star, okay, which was the service of our customers, and the impact of our existing customers. Where I think the challenge arose was, and it was natural, but the team got split out into different silos. So Heather actually got made redundant after the first year. And it was all cool. It was all a good situation. Like there was just no need for her to lead the team anymore, because what happened was that the devs got rolled into the development team, and customer service got rolled into the customer service team. So now everyone's now got their new masters, but the main mission of the business, the magic, kind of somehow, I do think, got lost to a degree. And it's kind of the fluid in between everything that you can't define, that when you kind of pop the balloon and you break the parts out, there's something there that's not definable, that it was greater than the sum of its parts effectively. And the other thing I think that happens in that scenario is, so if I give you an example, in terms of customer support, it was a SaaS product, but we had multiple channels of support. So you could raise a ticket, you could email, we had a community, and we had a phone line, right? We're the only SaaS business with you could actually call up. And we had an outside source call center, but they were so friendly. They'd take a message and then we'd call you back. But on the phone, we'd actually ring you within like a couple of hours, right? But it was a great selling point. And when we were at exhibitions and at events, people would recommend us saying, oh, their support is amazing. You can even call them. Like, it was so good, right? Massively inefficient, but fantastic from a marketing point of view. The issue then, though, is when you silo that business out into different teams, and now you've got customer support answerable to a customer support manager who has customer support metrics, which is how do we manage customer support tickets as efficiently as possible? A phone call is not efficient, so it gets turned off. We get rid of the phone line. It's not an efficient way. Well, let's bring everything into support tickets, which makes perfect sense. I get it. But however, that team isn't thinking, but marketing is sat there going, well, hang on a minute. That's a really good marketing tool for us though. Like we bring in business because of that. We don't give a shit. Because we don't care how you're doing on marketing. We've got our own goals to hit. So now everyone's hitting their own goals and being successful in their own silos, but the overall goal, the overall mission, and someone driving that forward just disappeared. And I think that was gold
this is such gold for our listeners, because unlike you, many of our listeners will need to sign on for an earnout, where their future payments will be at risk achieving a goal, usually as a division of that company. So unlike you, they'd be like, okay, we got to hit this milestone. And when you start to mess with the secret sauce, in your case, the phone number, that was really a marketing ploy, that it seems like such a subtle difference. But if you are part of a large company and they say, drop the phone number, and by the way, these developers are not going to report to these people, and the marketing people are going to report into some regional VP over here, all of a sudden your ability to achieve your earnout goes away. You did it smart, and it's not always possible for all of our listeners because they run service companies, et cetera, but you did an quote, again, air quotes, earnout. It was not contingent on the performance of the company. It was contingent on you staying employed. And that's, if you can get it, great. But if you're going into an earnout, understanding what is the intention for this business as a division of the company that's acquiring, are you going to break it up into pieces and lose the, as you described, the kind of the subtleties that make it so exciting and so powerful. So such a great lesson for our listeners for sure.
And I'm just thinking there, John, like, we had a net promoter score of 78. Just start
unbelievable
from a customer service point of view.
For folks who don't know that term, 50% or greater would be considered world-class. Like Harley Davidson is 50, whatever. So being anywhere north of 50 is like top. So you were in the 70s. Unbelievable.
Yeah. And well, thank you. And, but there's things that we knew that we were doing to achieve that, right? So if you're then having an earnout period and you say, well, you want me to maintain those standards. Well, these are the 20 things that we do to hit that. So you can't now corrode these things because you're going to deteriorate this. And I can share this because this is in the public domain. But a few months ago, GoProposal won an award at an accountancy event, a wooden spoon award for the worst customer service. And it was just, I heard this and I was just heartbroken. I was heartbroken. Like, I still give a shit. Like, I'm out the deal, but my team, I still see them as my team. They're still there. And to think that something you've created could lead to that is a sad situation.
Wow. That's interesting. But in Sage's defense, they presumably had a very thoughtful approach to the deal. They knew they wanted to fold it into the business, get the different pieces to get into the and so that's why they didn't do an earnout. I'm sure they structured it and said, look, we don't want to be fighting with James the whole time, so we want to integrate this thing as quickly as possible. So let's keep James around for a couple of years as an ambassador, but let's not be fighting with him all the time. So let's not put his payments contingent on the success of GoProposal. I'm obviously I don't know anything proprietary about Sage, but that would be what I would imagine they would have been saying behind closed doors.
For sure. And I'm looking at this through one lens, but they're looking at it through, we've got to make sure that legally we're all safe, and that the GoPros are now using the same systems as us, and that we can't be hacked. And like, there's so many things that they're considering from a risk perspective that could impact the brand. So they are doing this balancing act. They can't just kind of do everything that we're doing, because there's certain things that have to be done. So I'm not saying they're even wrong to do that.
No,
and they're far smarter than me. But it's going to be different to what you had,
Yeah. What is it? Who was the first one to sort of say, kind of follow the money, understand people's incentives and you'll understand their behavior. I can't remember if it was Warren Buffett who said that. I think he's repeated something similar, but if you understand how incentives are structured in a large corporation, you can start to see why the decisions that they take are, and to your point about customer service, it's like the incentive is efficient dealing with tickets. Well, that's totally anathema to, a phone number. So, like you can start to understand, if you understand the incentives of the various groups, you can start to imagine what behaviors they might be pursuing. So let's talk about life after Sage. So you got your second tranche payment that you were kind of owed, and was I've talked to some people. It's like they know one of my mentors. His company got acquired by a big publicly traded advertising agency, and like he knew the day his 2-year tenure was up. Like he literally had he knew the day, the time. It was like 4:55 on the 12th of November, and okay, that's his day. Everybody knew that he was not going to stick around past the day. Was it like that with you? Was it like everybody kind of knew James is out of here, 2 years plus a day, or did you feign like you were going to stick around for longer?
Well, it's a weird thing because you're not allowed to kind of hand your notice in. So you can't do anything that implies you're going to leave, because that would negate the final payment. So you can only give the impression that you stay in, but they all know the score. They're like, it was cool. And so we kind of got to the end of the process, and then I said, look, I'll do a kind of work with you for a period of time to do the handover, and then we'll kind of wrap things up, and we're done. So that was what happened. Got the final payments, the final handover. And I'm still in touch with them. Like occasionally they'll message me because they need to know something, or you've still got this domain name on your GoDaddy system, or can we get this, whatever. So like I'm in touch with them, and I speak with the team regularly and things like that. So it's not like a complete cutoff, but yeah.
What was your last day like? Like, did Neil throw you a party? Did you go for pints? Did you guys kind of celebrate, or was it don't let the door hit you on the way out?
It was none of those things. It was, I'd messaged in, and I'm like, right, I expected something, and there was nothing. There wasn't even a goodbye. No one contacted me. It was just a formal letter from HR saying, this is to conclude your employment here. We're done. And I was like, is that like, I messaged back like a week. I said, does no one like want to come and get my credit card off me, or my laptop is like, or like tell me what I'm not allowed to do? Like even like just give me the riot act and tell me what I'm not allowed to do moving forward, or anything. Nothing. It was just, that was it. And so I do have a sadness to that, because it's a weird thing. I don't know what it's the equivalent of, like just walking out the back door and not even saying goodbye to your team, not a formal, nothing. I don't know what else to say. Completely unexpected. Like you would expect something, wouldn't you? But nothing.
Like a retirement party, a big celebration, like accolades, awards, speeches.
Or just a phone call. Just a phone call from anybody, from somebody, but not from anybody.
So what next?
So what happened next, or what's next for me?
No, what happened next?
Okay, so the process ended, the payment's done, and you kind of now left to your own devices to think what's next. Okay, and I don't know if we went away or something, but like a few little bits happened, nothing major. And then I had time, and time is a bad thing. And one thing I learned throughout this whole process is, as an entrepreneur, you become a fantastic worrier. So if you imagine worrying is a muscle, you are like the flexed, your worry muscle is just ripped because you use it every single day. Where can this shit go wrong? How can we be sued? What can this happen with us? You know, how is our competitor doing? Changing technology, constantly worrying. But you learn to worry well in that you have meetings and quarterly planning sessions, and you say, right, I'm going to assign my worry muscle to this situation, and we're going to do a SWOT analysis or whatever it may be, right? We're going to do it well. So you end the process, your worry muscle is out here, but it's got nowhere to go, got nothing to be used for, but it's desperate to be used. And you have time. And the game you've been playing is playing not to lose. And one thing that I've learned happened to me was, as an entrepreneur, you are a tree. If you were to let's go with the analogy of an apple tree, John, you're growing, and you learn as an entrepreneur to produce fruit, and you grow stronger, and you send your roots deeper, and you weather storms, and you grow, and you're able to produce fruit, etc. And this is what you're attached to. This is who you believe you are. You are a strong tree. Then you sell the business. You're no longer needed to be an entrepreneur. You don't need to grow anything. You've no longer got a team. You don't have to compete with your competitors. You have this mother load of payout of fruit, which is all dropped. So now my psyche became attached to the fruit and not to the fact that I was a tree or had the ability to produce fruit. I was now attached to this fruit. The nature of fruit, though, or of a pile of anything, is that it can be rotten, it can be stolen, it can be lost, it can be squandered, and all this stuff. So you've now got this mother load of money. I've been trained for the last 2 years by Sage to play not to lose. So I've now got this mother load of cash. I'm now thinking, where can it go wrong? My worry muscle is firing on all 4 cylinders. And not to get into too much depth, but I had a bit of an awakening after COVID, effectively. And all of that world, all of what happened through the pandemic was very disruptive for lots of us in lots of different ways. It made you either agree with what was happening in the world, or it made you question what was happening in the world. As an entrepreneur, I started to question everything, thinking, is the government really acting in my best interest? Like, should I have really had that vaccine? Or like, your head's just going like 10 to the dozen, right? So I'm playing not to lose. Got this thing here. I've got time. And this thing knows exactly
You're
what
holding up your
my phone,
Yeah.
this thing,
Yeah.
and Instagram and TikTok know exactly what mindset you're in. And it will just feed you shit to keep you spiraling down, panicking. And I got to a point that my world was coming to an end, and I was going to lose everything, and our health, our family's health. Like, my head was just in a constant state of panic, and I hit a breakdown. I had a breakdown. Now, if you'd have said this term to me years ago, or someone had a breakdown, I'd be like, John, get a grip, get up, mate. Come on, get on with it. Dust yourself down. Let's get on with it. Which is naive of me, and various other things. But I had a physical drop into the floor. I had to get out of the car. I was with my wife. She knew it was coming, been building up. I pulled over. I got out of the car. I was on the floor, on my hands and knees, like in tears, thinking it was all coming to an end. I just couldn't. It was such a crash. And she didn't try to pull me out of it. She sat with me, and she just heard me. I'm here. I can hear. She didn't try to change my mind. She didn't try to convince me of anything different. She worked with me, got me back in the car, calmed me down. I was just sobbing, like I couldn't breathe for tears, right? Got me back home, got kind of the gist of it out of me, calmed me down, and she says, we're going to get you some help. And my wife is from she was a mental health nurse, so she's very connected to that. And she's got a friend who works with people in this situation and worse. And she rang me and says, James, and obviously she knows him very well. He needs somebody. And she says, I know the person he needs. And so she wrote this most beautiful letter to this woman and describing me. And I was just filling up with tears to think that she thought this thing of me and that I needed this help. And the sale of a business, the letting go of something, the losing of your purpose, the transition of playing to win to playing not to lose, to trying to achieve something to getting it. And the other thing to throw into this mix as well, John, is we aim for these things in life. We aim for these goals, and it's not the goal we want. That's not what we're really after. We're after the feeling that we think is going to come with that goal. Okay. So it's the same with sports people. While they're trying to win the trophy, while they're trying to become the world champion, they don't want to be the world champion. They want the feeling that they believe will accompany being a world champion. And I've studied this since then. I've looked at sports stars who have achieved this thing. Johnny Wilkinson, he's got some really interesting podcasts. He's a rugby player in the UK.
A rugby player, yeah.
He kicked the winning World Cup against, I think it was against South Africa or Australia, maybe Australia. Kicked the winning World Cup in the dying seconds. Like he'd practiced it with his brother all his life in the park. It was like his dream moment. He won the World Cup for his country. He'd done it. He did the thing. He woke up the next day and crashed. He describes exactly what I'm describing, what happened to me, is because he got there thinking it was going to change how he felt, and nothing changed. So then you have to ask yourself, well, what was I looking for to change? What did I think was lacking in me that I thought I was going to get from this outcome? So you now have to go inwards. And that was the next phase of my journey I had to go on, John. And when I talk about a breakdown, I believe it's not only likely, it's probably inevitable that this happens for entrepreneurs in this situation. And I also think it's a healthy thing if you have the support structure around you, because you need to break down from who you were to who you're now becoming. You're entering a different phase of your life. This is a different stage now that you're at. And so you have to actually fully break down, not resist it, not go against it, fully break down in order that we can rebuild. And I've had the scaffolding up for a while. Most of the scaffolding is down now. And but I built a really good support mechanism around me and to get through this. But and the other thing, I'm sorry, I'm going off on one now, John. Sorry. The other thing is you can't tell anyone you need help. You can't, oh my God, what's up, James? Oh, I've got all this money. I've got millions and millions of pounds. I've achieved my dream. I've got everything I ever wanted. I've got all this time in the world. Oh, and I need help. It's like, what? You like, who do you think you're going to get sympathy from with that? So you can't actually ask for help as well, but you're really struggling.
Wow. Well, I don't know where to start, but I've got so many questions because I find this to be, well, thank you for sharing. It can't be terribly easy to share a physical and emotional breakdown at that level. I imagine that to be scary as well, just the becoming physically overcome by anxiety, as well as just in your head. But when it starts to express itself physically, like having to get out of the car and like being on your knees, like that I mean, you can't ignore that. You can't, I mean, people around you see that. People on the street that don't even know you see you and think, wow, that guy's having some sort of major breakdown.
Yeah. And like there had been signs. I'd been waking up at 4 a.m. in the morning, just like my eyes just opening, just swirling with thoughts, and then like if you're in that mood, your phone and socials is the worst thing, because the moment you just pause for a second on something that resonates with your mindset, it's like, great, let's just feed him more of this shit. Let's just keep him right here. So you're spiraling down, you're keeping quiet, you maybe your circle of friends has shrunk, you feel like you can't tell anyone. So there were signs there. And it's like the universe kind of is watching and saying, James, you're not listening to my signs. Like, you need to do some work here. You're not listening. It's like, eventually it's like, okay, you're going to listen to this, bang, and we'll just give you what you need. And in that respect, it is a gift. But I think it can be preempted. You know, a guy called Patrick Bet-David, who I follow, talks about this, about like entrepreneurs and successful people. And at different phases of our growth, we have to become somebody else. And we can spot this is happening, and we can actually start to change who we are electively before a breakdown or something happens. But if you don't choose to do that, then you're going to get this bang on the head, and you'll be forced to deal with that.
What are the signs that it's happening?
It's a great, really good question. I think going inward, retreating, looking for one. I don't know if this is the answer to the question, John, but let me just go with this and just see if it answers the question. One thing I've learned is that we rely on things. We think we're going to get energy. We think our energy is going to be restored from external things, whether that's a lump sum of cash, whether that's the recognition for selling a business, with the love of your wife, from your wife, whatever, but the buying a nice car, moving into a bigger house, all this shit that I did, right? So you do these things and you think you're going to get this uplift of energy in them, but they're all unreliable sources. And they can all take away, they all have the capacity to take energy away as well. Like, you can have the love of your wife, but you can also have an argument with your wife. Like, it can come and go. But there are sources of energy that are fully reliable. They're smaller and you're in control of them, such as working out every day, such as eating good food, such as doing breath work, such as meditating for 5 minutes a day. These are all reliable sources of energy that I can control and that I can tap into, and I can replenish and rebuild. So I think if I was to look back, I would have started to have reduced the good quality energy sources, working out less, eating shit food, you know, and then trying to get energy from other sources that are unreliable, whether that's drinking more, doom scrolling on social media, like all of these things that you know are going to give you a short-term bit of a kick, but they're not replenishing deep, energizing activities. So if I was to think what the signs are, how you spot this, I don't know, but I think it would be a movement of energy sources.
Interesting. Tell me about the first meeting you had with your therapist.
So I'd never had therapy before. And I know in America, it's kind of a much more common thing to do. But in England, it's not common. For a man, it's certainly not common. For a man in the north of England, from a mining village, it's not common. And for someone who's like, it's not for like a bad reason, it's for like a good thing, is a rare situation. So it was this lady, and I met her online, and it culminated in a really interesting experience at the end of it all, which I'll tell you about. Remember the word horses, we'll come back to that. But she just helped me to understand myself. She saw me first, John, and that was enough. There was no, we're just going to sit with this. Like, there was no answers. There was no, it was just to have someone to hear you. And if you're upset, it's not to say, I'm going to try and stop you being upset. It's like, I see you're upset. Like, I'm just going to sit with you with this. And it was just such a refreshing thing that somebody was there. They're not trying to solve your problems. They're just going to sit with you. They can see you. They can hear you. And I got so much from that. And then, and just non-judgmental, just the most non-judgmental person. And she did this thing with me, which she calls Pines, which I learned, which is just, we're just going to check in with you. So just physically, how you're feeling. Intellectually, I don't need to know what you're thinking, but what's the quality of your thoughts? Is it bouncing? Is it blurred? Is it whatever? Neurologically, Like on this scale, are we here? And what noise it make? I'm like, I'm here. I'm here. Okay. He was emotionally, like, again, like, just give me some words. And then the final one was spiritually and socially. And even just doing that check-in across those different areas, where am I? Like, was and I've never done that before. Just say, where am I in these different areas and how am I feeling about that? And again, there was no judgment with it. I could say whatever I wanted, and she wasn't. There was no. I could feel like that, and it was okay.
What was the most meaningful? It sounds like the check-in was meaningful. Was there another meaningful exercise that you did that comes to mind where you had a bit of a breakthrough around? Was there a question she asked or an exercise that you did together where, as you look back, it was a really meaningful breakthrough?
There were lots of things. So we started to do, I guess, the identification. Yes. This is part of my continued therapy. That's why I reached out to you, John. I wanted this session with you because I knew there was like a final part of my therapy that I needed to complete.
I'm sending you an invoice, buddy, for sure.
It's fine. So it's this idea that, sorry, these headphones, I keep changing these earbuds, but they keep slipping out. That we all experience trauma. Now, there's capital T trauma and there's small t trauma. So capital T, we can imagine what that means, and significant traumas in our childhood, and people obviously experience that. But we all experience small t trauma to some degree, whether that's not getting the love from a parent that you wanted, or a parent's divorcing, or a teacher that was just horrible to you, or whatever. And what it comes down to is that as a kid, things happen and you can't explain it. So it could be a parent coming in from work late who you've been waiting to see and excited to see, and they come in and they're just grumpy with you and dismiss you, and they don't want to see your painting you've drawn or whatever, and they just, pie you off or whatever. As a kid, you can't say, okay, my dad's been working late today, he's struggling to pay that bill, and it's not about me, it's about him, and he got stuck in traffic, so I'll file that away there and we're all good, okay? You can't process that as a kid. So it just swirls around in your body. This feeling, this emotion never gets filed. It just gets stored. And there's a really interesting book called Your Body Keeps the Score.
Oh, so I've heard about this. Yeah.
So it's a deep book. It's heavy work, but your body will keep that score. And then you start to layer that up. And listen, right? All families are messed up. Like, there's crazy, I don't know anyone with a normal family. There's crazy shit that happens in every family, right? And there's events that you just kind of write off. So that's just normal, isn't it? It's normal that my parents would have blazing rows and my mum would try to kill my dad. That's just like a normal thing. But oh no, it's not. Oh shit, right? Okay, let's talk about that. So yeah, and what can happen is, as an adult, you can look back on these events and you can rationalize them and say, well, I understand where my parents were. I understand what was going on. So I forgive them. Like, I forgive them fully. But inside, you've got this inner child, that's this wounded inner child that's like, well, I haven't forgiven them. I haven't figured this shit out yet. And what she explained it to me was like, like after, I can't remember which war it was, but like there were Japan. I know Japan was mentioned. So whatever, after the Second World War.
Second World War.
Japan.
Yeah.
And the like Japanese soldiers were in the jungle and they were locked away and hidden down. And then they were like dropping notes on them saying, the war's over, like you can come out now. But they didn't believe it. And so for like years afterwards, the war had finished. They were still hidden away, hunkered down, ready for the enemy to attack at any point. And in ourselves, we have this inner child that's like, doesn't know the war's over. It doesn't know the fight's over. I'm like a strong man now. I can deal with shit, right? But the inner child is still there and just needs to be kind of to say, it's okay. You can come out now. We can deal with this. And I think, I think a big part of this is the reason why entrepreneurs do what they do. Like, I remember reading somewhere that there's 3 traits of an entrepreneur. This guy studied entrepreneurs and he tried to figure out that they all wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning, or they're all got a 6-pack, or they all do an ice bath. And they're like, there was nothing. There was no trend. Some got up at 10 a.m., some got up at 5 a.m. Some were fat, some were thin, right? The only three things he could find that were the same across them all were they all had kind of this opinion of themselves that they're able to achieve incredible things. Like it was beyond their capabilities. They were just unstoppable and they could achieve this amazing thing. But they also had this sense of complete inadequacy and that they were not good enough. And it was the flux between these two things combined with the third thing, which was the ability to stay focused on one thing for long enough. So if they had this moving between these two things and they could keep moving forward towards this goal, that's what made them successful. And if you look at where we feel inadequate, it's very often we weren't born in feeling that way. We've learnt that from somebody. We've learned that we are less than we are. We have learned that we've learned that from a parent, from a sibling, from a friend, from the news, from experience, whatever. We've learned that. So I actually believe that the very trait that makes an entrepreneur be able to succeed will be the thing that once they succeed and you think that that's now going to stop, emerges even bigger, then makes you think, shit, now I've got to deal with something. I've got to go in and try and figure this out.
So fascinating, because while you're achieving and you're focusing on this future thing, you are in some ways keeping those two things in check, right? You believe you can achieve extraordinary things, and you're motivated to prove to the world that you can, to prove to yourself and others. So there's this need for validation, and it's keeping you going in that direction. All of a sudden you take all that away, and yeah, I can imagine it's a very disruptive experience for a lot of entrepreneurs.
And add the final thing into that as well, John, which is you've got the most socially acceptable addiction going on as well, which is work. Like you're working towards this goal, you're working ridiculous hours, it's consuming all of your mind, it's the only thing you're thinking about, and that takes up all of your time and attention, and it's completely acceptable to be working towards this for all these bullshit reasons that we give. And then all of a sudden, it's like you've just pulled the addiction away. You've gone cold turkey on the addiction, and but whilst achieving the goal that you think is going to give you the thing which doesn't. So it's a collision waiting to happen, and there's nothing to protect you from it. There's no mechanism or support group or whatever that's there to look after you.
So what happened next? So obviously you went through a period of with lots of therapy and lots of conversations and you've worked through it. Just give folks a sense of your life today. I mean, what are you doing professionally? How are you balancing and keeping, the monkey mind at bay, et cetera?
Sure. So just to kind of conclude the therapy piece, John, if I can, just very quickly, is so I had the therapy, but like I say, my wife works in mental health. And what she said is, look, this is good work that you're doing. Like you need to get under the skin of this and kind of figure some shit out, but you also can't stay here. Like it's okay to go and kind of figure out what's causing some of this and do some of the shadow work, etc. But it's not healthy to keep doing that. We've got to get out and start thinking about what's next. So she kept me in check with that. The final piece of, so it came to an end, the therapy with this lady, and the final piece of therapy with her was me spending 2 immersive days with her and a herd of 8 wild horses. And it was how I could come in connection with horses and to be in myself. And when I arrived there on the first day, it was like a long drive, like 4-hour drive to be with her on this day. I got there and she said, I'd never experienced this before, John. She said, we're not going to talk. You're just going to arrive. I'm like, what do you mean? She said, no, we're not going to talk. We're just going to go for a really slow walk, half an hour or so. If you want to touch a tree, touch a tree. If you want to feel the grass, you want to sit down, you want to put your hand in the river, do whatever you need to do. For half an hour, we're going to walk slowly and you're going to arrive here. And it was the bizarrest thing. And we did it and we eventually sat there. It's the first time I've ever met her. So I've been on online calls with her. So my head's like whirring and all these things I think I'm going to say to her. We arrived, and then after half an hour, we sat down and she said, hi, introduce herself. How are you? And it was just this loveliest thing that we never arrive, do we? We're always in our head and we don't just be here. So it was this presentness was such an important experience. And I was staying with a friend down there as well, who was a wonderful artist. doesn't have a mobile phone, just very connected. So this immersive like few days of just being connected to real people and fully in the moment, which is what we rarely do, you know. So that was great. And also at this time, I'd found another online mentor as well, this guy that did shadow work, which is kind of looking into traumas, but also golden shadow work. Like we have areas of our life where our brilliance can shine through, but we hide that away. We've learned to hide it away. So it's recognizing these things and building our confidence again. You know, working in a corporation, we can lose our confidence and we can lose our belief in ourselves. But what you don't lose your belief in is your intentions. And it's connecting back to what are my intentions? And we can derive a lot of confidence from that. And then so I had 3 people help me. So I had the therapist who dug me out, an online guy in Australia who really helped me with breath work. And I've now got a daily habit of every morning getting outside, grounding myself on the earth, energizing myself, doing my breath work. And that's been a really good constant for me every single day as well. And then
you must look like a freak.
Oh, mate.
Doing your breath work.
I look up at my kids. Like I look up at the bedroom window thinking they're going to look out any moment now. Yeah, I'm completely cool with that. I'm all right with that.
That's awesome.
And then the final piece was a mentor that my business partner put me in touch with him. And he had been a pastor and he works with kind of CEOs and people who have exited. Really wise guy. And so I've been on a mentoring program with him for the last 4 or 5 months, something like that. So each month we meet and we go for a walk. And he picks the most interesting places to kind of we went for a walk up this hill and there was just like a plane crash on top from the Second World War and the plane is still there intact. And then we'd sit on the rocks and he'd do some mentoring with me. So it's like just a great mentoring experience with a really smart guy. And then that culminates in 2 days away next week. That's the final part. And what he talks about in that, John, is preparing for the second half of our life. Like what you've done so far, building this wealth, building the business, doing all of this, that was part 1. We've now got part 2, and you have to prepare for part 2. And some of the characteristics of the second half is actually letting go of a lot of stuff. Like, and what he describes is like, in order to get, this is really interesting, I think, John. In order to get through part 1, we needed weapons. Like you needed that hammer to break that door down. And you needed that sword to slay that dragon. And we needed this spear to kill all those people off and fight through those or whatever, right? So now we're here at the end of this journey and we've got all of these weapons on our back. And we're now in part 2. And it's like, you don't need that anymore. We can put that, we got through the door. The dragon's dead. We can like let a lot of this stuff go. And so the characteristics of part 2 has been a lot lighter, letting a lot of things go. And here's the other one as well, not knowing and being okay with not knowing. Like in part 1, we feel the need to know, we need to feel the need to control everything and that I've got my shit figured out and I have all the answers. Where now in part 2, and I'll give you some examples of this, it's like, I don't know. And I'm actually okay with not knowing, but we're going to figure it out. Like we'll get through this. And so that's what the next 2 days, next week is going to be all about, is the signing off, the formal signing off of part 1 and the full start of part 2.
That sounds incredible. And what an amazing journey to go through and to share it with our listeners. I mean, I could go on for hours with you. Do you feel like we've captured the essence of what you kind of wanted to share with our listeners? Is there anything that I haven't asked that I should have, that you wished someone had told you before you went through this journey?
I keep answering the question, like the question that you asked before, because I keep answering the different questions. But in terms of what I'm doing now at the moment, John, I've got a couple of businesses that I've invested in that kind of gives me my fix of kind of working with them and helping them to exit, like building to exit as well. They've got clear exit plans over the next 4 years. So
these are
great.
Accounting firms, or
one's a big accountancy firm. Yeah. So really boring, established business that's proven. and 20-year history that's got a clear plan in place, and I can work with them and really help them, which is really exciting. And another business as well. And I'm sharing what I'm learning and unpacking what I've done. And I say I'm writing a book about my entrepreneurial journey, but I've written the intro like 30 times. So it might just be a collection of introductions to a book. In fact, I might just publish all the introductions I've written to this book and that I've never actually got into. But I just feel the need to pass that on because I think I arrived at some interesting conclusions that I've now got confidence in. I think one of the things is money that I think is worth just mentioning, in that I thought that I was pursuing money so I could do all these amazing things and live this great life. When I actually look at what my real motives were, I think it was actually, we've all got a very unique psychology towards money that's based on our upbringing, where we were born, when we were born, who we were born to, what events happened in our lives, etc. And there's a good book called The Psychology of Money that's worth kind of you digging into to help you to understand your own personal relationship to
Morgan
money.
Housel, yeah, great book.
Yeah. But I think one of my big drivers was actually safety. Like I derived feeling safe with having money from a protective point of view, because I'm the most boring millionaire in the world. Like I don't do anything, don't go anywhere. Like I've had to like find a relatively nice t-shirt to put on because I'm normally just dressed like a tramp. Like I don't give a shit about things. I'm not bothered about fancy restaurants or anything like that, right? But anyway, so when I looked at it, it was from safety. And also the other thing about money is that we think it will solve our problems. And it did. It solved all of my immediate problems and created far more bigger ones that I wasn't expecting. And then it's easy for people to say, well, I'd rather have your problems than my problems. And it's like, I don't know if you would. I don't actually know if you would. Because, there's been points when my wife has said, I just want to give it all away. I'm done. I want it all to go because of how we're feeling or like certain things. And so I think that's certainly an interesting thing.
Like
the other thing,
like when you talk about your wife, I'd be just curious, like what would cause her to say, I want to give it all away?
I'm not quite sure. One of the things that you get is the burden of decisions that you never had to make before. So for example, life was just lighter. It was just easier before because we never had to think about certain things. They just were. So I'll give you an example. Me and my wife met at school. We didn't go out of school. I had to wear her down over a long period of time and catch her at a low point many years later. But we met at school. My stepdaughter went to the same school. Our two youngest children went to that school. Like it's the local state school. It's near us. It's on the local bus routes. They can get to the school. It's the only option. We couldn't afford private school. They couldn't afford school else, and we couldn't afford to move anywhere else. Therefore, is it a good school? Is it a bad school? Doesn't actually matter because it's the only school they can go to. So it is what it is. So now none of my head has to think about the schooling of our children. Then all of a sudden, you have this lump sum of cash, and now the outcome of their education is now entirely on me because I can move them from that school to that private school or to that private school, or we could move house to a different school or whatever. So now it's entire. So now I have that burden of, which I guess is a good burden, but if we make the wrong decision, then you're beating yourself up about that decision. Are you with me? So
100%.
And here's the other thing as well. This is the other thing as well, John. Your partner is like such a big part of your life. Like it really affects the outcome of your life and your joy of life, etc. And I love my wife to bits. And when you get together, it's because you love each other and fancy each other and all that stuff and your friends and all this. But it's because you have some aligned values about the world, some views of the world you are largely aligned on. Don't have to be everything, but you're largely aligned on certain values, okay? And then as you kind of grow through life, You then have children. It's like, oh, we never had to know what our aligned values were around children. So now we have to align them. What do we think about, how we reprimand our children or how they should be educated? Like, oh, we agree on that. Cool. Let's carry on. So as you move through life, you have these new set of values that you have to readjust and align with. When a load of money gets dumped into your life, it now opens up a whole room of values that you never had to consider whether you are aligned on or not before. And now you have to consider whether you're aligned. So for example, around the education of your children, my wife didn't want them to go to a private school. I did. So you've now got you've got new conflicts that you never had before. And the other thing that somebody said to me, which I think is interesting, is, so he'd sold his business. He said, this will be a real test as to whether you love your wife or not. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, most of the arguments that that a married couple will have will be about money. Okay. But it's not really about money. It's about all the other shit, but you just blame money. So every argument you've probably had with your wife up until this point has been about money, but not really. But that's been the kind of the scapegoat. Well, now you've solved that problem. So now you're going to find out what the real shit's all about and whether you really like each other or not. So it opens all this other stuff. And you have to realign as a married couple. You have to, and this requires work. We've started couples therapy, to not because we feel there's anything broken or that, there's huge issues, but to realign. There's been an event, a traumatic event, a positively traumatic event, but an event with trauma attached to it that's radically changed our lives. And it's like, are we realigned for the next part of our journey together as well? So there's lots there, I think, John. And there's moments where you think, fuck, it was easier before is the answer. It was easier before. But that's not to say that it's not worth digging in and working through and resolving this stuff. And my thing I'd like to say to listeners is that these things that I've worked through, being aligned with your wife, understanding your relationship to money, digging into past traumas and understanding motivations and things, this is stuff you can do on the journey. Like if you've not sold your business yet, you can do this now so that I think you can meet a sale of a business with more awareness and more preparedness for how you might feel.
I think that's a great place to stop. And I think you hit the nail on the head. The more of this work that you can do before you sell, the less likely it is that you'll go through the kind of experience that you had, which, as hard as it probably was at the time, we're grateful that you chose to share with our listeners, or I'm grateful that you chose to share it. So thank you for doing that, James. I really do appreciate it. If people wanted to get connected, is LinkedIn still the best place to find you, or are you open to sort of connections on LinkedIn or Insta?
Yeah.
Or what's your preference?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is the place that I just kind of share my thoughts of the day on there, and people kind of reach out. I had loads of people message me after our last podcast and thank me for that and for what we shared there. And I just want to thank you, John, because I think what you're doing here is such a valuable thing, and you're such a great interviewer, because it's not like you've got questions. You deeply care and you deeply understand this, and you deeply care about your listeners, and you want to genuinely help them. So I find that your questioning is just so wonderful and generous. So really thank you for what you're doing here. And also, I'm just going to tell you this. You did a podcast I was listening to. I was in Mexico. I can't remember which episode it was, but it was about, I will be able to find it, about the sale of a business with somebody, and they didn't sell all of it. They kept a percentage of the new company, which then so they got a double bite of the cherry. So they got a bite of the first valuation and then a double bite of the second on the second exit, if that makes sense. I can't remember the episode, but I remember listening to it thinking, this is amazing, right? So I shared it with my friend who'd sold 4 businesses up until that point. And he'd repeated the process, very successful entrepreneur. I said, you got to listen to this. So I sent him your podcast, and he just built this monster business, tens of millions in revenue, huge business, great guy. And he was going into his exit, and he used your guidance, and he did just that. And he sees that the second bite of the cherry will be bigger potentially than the first bite that he got. So again, using these great gifts that you're sharing from the people that you interview, it's it's impacting people and it's really making a difference.
Oh, it's generous of you to say, James. Thank you very much for saying it. And I'm thrilled that your friend had a good outcome and that you're in good spot. So thank you for doing this. We will put your LinkedIn profile in the show notes at Built to Sell, along with some of the books you referenced, which I think are great resources for folks going through this or about to go through this. So James, again, thanks for doing it.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.